people are at the center of what we do. I'm convinced we're all in the same business, whether you're in healthcare, technology, education, we're all in the people business.
On this episode of TLC Connections, GT Freeman sits down with Dennis Mahoney, founder of AOI Solutions and a leader in disaster response, community partnerships, and social impact initiatives. Dennis shares how his work has taken him from communities recovering from hurricanes and humanitarian crises to collaborative efforts supporting schools, families, and neighborhoods here in Philadelphia. Together, GT and Dennis explore the power of relationships, the importance of bringing diverse partners together, and what it takes to help communities not only recover, but truly thrive. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Welcome, Dennis. I'm so happy to have you here.
It's such a gift to be here. Great to see you, GT.
I had tried to get you on much earlier, but it seems like every time I call you, you are either in a different state or another country. And so I know you do a lot of crisis work. Can you explain exactly what that is?
Sure, absolutely. So AOI Solutions, the company that I founded, what we focus on is building partnerships, particularly around disasters or international development. A lot of times when a crisis occurs, it's a systematic issue where a lot of things are broken down, there's chaos everywhere, and bringing in different types of partners around a crisis is what we specialize in. So for example, with Hurricane Melissa that just occurred in Jamaica, we went in on day 8. There was no water, there was no electricity, and what we were doing was bringing in food providers and connecting them with helicopters that could drop that into communities that had not received food. So it was identifying who was the food partners, identifying people who could help drop that food, and identifying community leaders that could help us find out where people were stranded at that time.
So is it more like a liaison role? Like you come in and are you like a connector? You're connecting all the different... Yeah.
Absolutely. So like a connector, sometimes we're a convener afterwards with the rebuild process with communities. But at the outset, it's really just being able to make those right connections and figure out who's doing what and how can we actually bring organization to that. So
when you show up to a disaster, do they know you're coming? Well, first of all, who's expecting you? Is it the local government?
So generally, GT, we try to get as close to the people as possible. And what we find is churches and houses of worship usually are the ones who know who is disabled in their community, who is a vulnerable person, where are the recluses at. So we work with them, but then we also coordinate with FEMA for domestic disasters. And then we'll also work with governments in foreign countries.
Got it. Now, do you have a pre-existing relationships with some of these churches, or you are meeting them for the first time, depending on wherever the disaster is?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of both. One thing that we try to do at AOI is create blue sky relationships for those gray sky days. And so that is being proactive and going out and meeting communities. So for example, we mapped out where are the countries that are most likely to have a disaster occur. It might be places that you'd think of: Jamaica, the Bahamas, the Dominican Republic. Even though it's part of the U.S., it's still a plane ride, Puerto Rico. And then we'll go into those communities, the Philippines, and start connecting with people ahead of a disaster. But if a disaster occurs, we'll go out and meet those people if we don't have pre-existing relationships. So with like the LA wildfires, we didn't have those relationships before, but we went out there and made contact with networks of churches there.
Right. Disasters and crises. So about how many of these happen in any given year? I mean,
it depends on how you want to, as far as national, it could be anything from, 3 to 4. It could be, but if you think about the amount of wildfires that are happening, the amount of flooding that is occurring, but having a massive international crisis, you probably have, I can't give a good number on how many those are, but there's a lot that occur that people just aren't thinking about, whether it's the famines in East Africa or the flooding and tsunamis in Southeast Asia or major flooding that happens in Pakistan. A lot of the world doesn't think about this day to day until it hits closer to home. Usually I feel like people pay more attention when it occurs in a place that they might vacation or have an affinity to.
Got it. So are you just like watching the news and you see a disaster and you just hop on a plane and go? How does that?
So the clients we serve generally have a footprint or a focus that they work in.
I see.
One of our previous clients that we still do some work with focuses on medical facilities for refugees.
Okay.
And so if there is a large refugee crisis, they'll typically respond to that. Another one of our groups focuses mostly domestically. So anytime something major happens domestically, we'll deploy out there for that as well.
Okay. So you mentioned clients then. So you have existing relationships with clients.
Correct.
Are those your partners, those organizations that work hand in hand with you at the disaster site?
Yeah, usually. Yeah. So AOI will be the ones helping those large NGOs make those relationships out there. So they'll say, hey, Dennis, we want to go out there to Jamaica and we want to deploy 1,000 volunteers, right? This is our specialty. We put roofs on buildings that have lost them, or we help hospitals stand back up. Can you go in there and make those relationships for us so that we know who to work with when we go out there?
So NGO is non-government organization. It includes nonprofits. What does AOI stand for?
Access, opportunity, and impact.
Okay.
Those are our North Stars. Those are the things that we like to spend our time working on.
Okay, and you started the company?
I did.
And then how did that come about?
I never saw myself starting a firm, but when I was getting my master's, I was doing a capstone project in Uganda where we were working to connect schools on the border where refugees from Sudan were coming in there. And these were really remote schools. And we were working to connect them with cell tower companies out there so that the kids could actually get digital education. It was a time where people could really leapfrog into the future with tech enablement and being able to actually be able to compete on the global level. And so we were working with my capstone focused on bringing the technology companies, connecting them with the Ministry of Education to be able to have the schools connected to the internet, and then having a local nonprofit facilitate the teaching, so the digital literacy component. So you had government, you had the private sector, and then you had this organization, this nonprofit, really helping facilitate that change. And it was what I coined as an integrated partnership that was occurring there, where it wasn't money transforming, but it was people who had shared values but different interests there. Their tech company wanted to sell more of their product, and this opens up a market for them. The government wants their people educated, and the nonprofit wants to serve that community. So all different interests, but still shared values of doing good. And so that was successful with 11 schools out there. And after that, I was speaking about it, and somebody offered me a job, and I love Philadelphia. That's home to me. I didn't want to leave and move to Texas. So I offered to do some consulting, and one client grew to 2 to 3 to 4. And then it just sort of took off after that.
Where did this interest in this type of work kind of really begin?
So it came from my family. It came from my mother and father. They both were hardworking people who worked really hard to give a great life to my siblings and I. My mother immigrated to the United States from Trinidad and Tobago and worked extremely hard through challenging situations. And they said, we didn't work this hard for you to just chase the proverbial American dream, but we want you to actually give back to this society. And faith is a big part of it too. My faith really inspires me to go serve the vulnerable. Now,
at what age was that formative relationship with your mother kind of?
Oh man, they say kids are catch more than they are taught. But anytime that anybody was moving, my mom would drop my 2 brothers and I off. I think we did about 140 moves before I was 18. That was just, if there was a widow in our church, she would drop me off every Wednesday to cut the grass. It was just what we did. There wasn't an option with my mother.
So have you always been doing this kind of work? Because I saw that you've also got an insurance background. You did some sales there for a while.
Yeah.
Was that just on your journey to find your way? Or?
So it was interesting. When I graduated from school, I studied business at the University of Vermont. I graduated and didn't know what I was going to do. So a mentor at the time sent me down to DC, and I got a job as a cyber underwriter. So I was an account exec there and was selling cyber insurance and underwriting it. And I loved it, and I loved traveling around the country and meeting people, but I felt like I was one of those few privileged people who had the choice that could do anything. So after much thought, I quit my job and took a job as a volunteer at a church. And it was at that time that I was doing community liaisoning around foster care,
Right.
affordable housing, and the opioid epidemic. But Hurricane Harvey hit in Texas. And then Hurricane Maria hit in Puerto Rico. And that's when I started getting into the disaster relief
How
work.
many years ago was that?
2017.
So you still remember all the names of the hurricanes. I mean,
Yes.
Yeah. Probably impactful when you get on the ground. I mean,
Yeah, I remember, some images just stay with you forever. I remember one of the first lessons I learned at Hurricane Harvey is, people are at the center of what we do. I know,
right.
I'm convinced we're all in the same business, whether you're in healthcare, technology, education, we're all in the people business. And I remember driving to somebody's house and just seeing the person had lost his leg a week prior to the hurricane. And so when the waters came, he was trapped in there, and he was sitting on his bed. He hadn't been fitted yet with a prosthetic. He still hadn't when I met with him. And the water filled up his house 6 inches, a foot, 3 feet. And he was sure he was going to die. And somebody smashed through his window, pulled him into a canoe at 10 o'clock at night, and took him and his wife and their dog out there. And just hearing those stories, you remember that there are people behind each house. And even though we were there to clean up houses and clear debris, it was like, man, these are people's lives. And that just sticks with you. And to be able to go out and serve people every day, I feel like I see the best in humanity.
Yeah. What's the furthest away you've been?
That depends. I've done some work in Malaysia. I do a lot of work in East Africa as well.
Okay.
Burundi is a place that I've really enjoyed doing some work in recently. We're doing water projects out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that mean you got to get a lot of vaccinations?
Sure do. Yeah. I have a lot of stamps.
Yeah. So you mentioned you were in DC there, and I also read from your LinkedIn profile you did worked for a government. Was it a governor or a senator or something?
So that was previously. So I worked for Phil Scott, who's the current governor of Vermont.
Okay.
He was lieutenant governor when I was with him. Yeah.
So your politics, and of course you go to DC where there's a lot of politics. I know some of the work you do is also about government work too.
Yeah.
So describe that.
Yeah. So what I always try to do, whatever crisis we're looking at, it could be something like the school districts in Philadelphia, it could be the foster care challenges that we're having in our state, or it could be an international crisis. I'm always thinking about how do we extend the table out and get as many people around it as possible, right? You want the community's voices there, you want the levers of government there, you want the private sector who can help fund some of this work, and then you want philanthropists too. So what we do at AOI is we often map out who are all the different stakeholders and who are we not thinking of that need to be at that table. Government always should have a seat there as well.
Yeah. So you do a lot of work elsewhere. What kind of work do you do in the Philadelphia area? Yeah.
So I love Philly. Philly's home for me. And one of the areas that we're working on in Philadelphia that I'm really excited about is addressing how do we love on our teachers, how do we love on our superintendents, and how do we love on our students well.
Yeah.
And so we brought together a collective group of folks, some folks from the school system, some faith-based leaders, some folks from the private sector. And we ended up designing this simple standard operating procedure that really helps any organization that wants to partner with the schools in Philadelphia to know exactly who to talk to, who are the decision makers, and how to figure out what needs they can actually fulfill.
Now, that's a little different than crisis work. So what led you?
Same principles,
Okay.
though. It's the same principles of, how do we really focus on helping an organization and a community thrive, right? Because the reason we go in a disaster is to get a community back to flourishing. And these same principles I think you can use in any organization as far as coming in and saying, let's get people to talk to one another, and then let's find the best solution.
Got it. So it's community thriving, either proactive or reactive after disaster. So you said, were you born and raised in Philly? Is that what you said?
So I was born outside of Philly.
Okay,
Yeah.
but you were raised here?
Yeah. Yeah.
So were you a product of the school system? Is that why you have an interest in the schools?
It's so funny. I'm the least likely person to be a part of the Philly school systems. I was homeschooled till the 9th grade.
Okay.
And then, and I don't have kids in it, but I just think that the kids the next generation is the most important thing in our city.
Right.
And if we invest in the kids now, and if
Right.
we love on our teachers and superintendents now, the city will flourish. I think one thing I learned with my work overseas is if you go to sort of the most vulnerable person and you take care of them well,
Right.
then the whole system thrives. And
Right.
I want Philadelphia to be a city where everybody can succeed, where everybody has agency and everybody can live out whatever they desire their calling to be.
Yeah. When you think of what you called community flourishing, either the work you're doing in Philly kind of being proactive or whether you're going to a disaster after the fact and you're rebuilding it, what are the most important elements? Is it leadership? Is it community connectedness? Is it what? I'm just thinking out loud. I don't know what helps. What are the main drivers? What are the antecedents of a community flourishing?
Yeah. So I think you first have to start with the understanding that it takes a long time. And it's slow because you have to bring people together and you have to listen, right? Once you listen, then it does come down to leadership. But oftentimes, so I previously was with Food for the Hungry, which is an organization that works in 19 countries. And we would walk with communities for 12 to 10 years to help them climb out of what people would consider extreme poverty, folks living on $1.90 a day. Right.
Wow.
But how we would start is people need to have ownership. So we would ask, what is the vision that you have for your community? I think it starts with that. People have to be bought in and know that this is what they want. Right. So it starts with listening to them, of being like, hey, what does thriving look like for your community? Because it's going to look different for a place in West Philly than it does in South Philly,
Yeah.
And so it's not coming in with sort of an agenda, but really taking a posture of humility and listening to the folks there.
Yeah.
Once they draw up a collective vision, then you need ownership in that. What are you going to do to help get you there? And this is what we can do, but we can't do it all for you. And then once that is agreed upon, then it's just executing on that. One thing that we would do at Food for the Hungry is we would have the whole community agree on a plan, and it would take about 1.5 years of them putting together their plan. But once they did that, everybody in the community had a vote. They had a rock. And so before Food for the Hungry would move forward with any of the community work, everybody would have to vote and be bought in and have leadership roles in actually executing that.
Yeah. That reminds me of a framework, the listen, learn, and lead framework, where you go into any situation, a new situation, and listening is critical. And you listen to learn.
Yeah.
And then through collecting all this information, you can start to aggregate it and synthesize it and start to put together something that can be executed, a plan, which then, of course, requires leadership. So what are some of the biggest obstacles you have found for example, overseas, in rebuilding a community, helping a community thrive again? What are some of the biggest obstacles that hinder that?
I think there's some that you see right away. Like some of them are just simple logistics, right? Like when we were doing work in Jamaica right after the hurricane, I landed there on day 8 afterwards, and there was no water, no electricity. The roads were still covered. A lot of communities could only be reached by helicopter. There was no telecommunications across a third of the island. And so something simple like there's only 3 helicopters on the entire island, and a third of the population is cut off. So that's like a simple but major logistical challenge, right? Then we were trying to get in skid steers to be able to open up the roads. We had a barge with 57 skid steers, but because of legal ramifications and the insurance, we couldn't get those released to come in. So there's bureaucratic issues. There's real live, we don't have the supply issues. And then you start dealing with some of the mental health issues too, because these families have gone through one of the most traumatic experiences that they have ever gone through, where literally you'd go to some places where it's just a foundation and everybody was in that house when the walls blew off and the roof goes away. And now every time those kids hear rain, they're terrified, right? Because it was the rain, the tapping of the rain on the roof before that all happened, and it rains every day there. So how do you go through and help folks just sort of heal from that trauma? And I think those are like the types of logistics. And I think that's where I think the power of partnership comes in, right? Because we don't have to solve every major challenge there.
Right.
But having relationships helps that because you know who you can bring in who can do that mental health therapy. Or, if these roads are bulldozed, is there a private sector company that owns their own machines that we can bring in to open up the roads there? Or are there, touring companies in other parts of the Caribbean that can send their helicopters over to help close the gap? And so all of it comes down to the power of relationship.
Yeah. So that's in a disaster context. In a non-disaster context, like the work you're doing in Philly in the school system, what are the obstacles or barriers to success there?
I think one of the beauties and one of the challenges in a city like Philadelphia is the spirit of independence. It is a beautiful group of people who are gritty, they're tough, they're kind, they take care of their neighbors. But a lot of times folks are working in their silos. And I think the great opportunity in a city like Philadelphia is for people to start talking to one another and then also collaborating well. We're seeing this with a initiative called the Safe Families Initiative that we're bringing to Philadelphia, where what Safe Families does is it supports mostly single moms who are at risk of losing their children to the foster care system.
Okay.
And we know that once a child goes into the foster care system, they are way more likely to be abused, end up in prison, or to be sexually trafficked. So keeping the child with the parents is majorly important for the long-term success of that child. And so what Safe Families does is when a mother is in crisis, it brings a FBI background checked person, mostly through a church, who can actually take that child for a day or provide respite for that mom to get her back on her feet. So for example, mom gets sick and has to go to the hospital. If she didn't have that community around her, child's going into the foster care system most likely. And so what we did was we got a handful of private funders to raise $100,000. We got a matching grant from the state. And then we mobilized about 40 churches to say, hey, let's train our people around this so that we can actually walk alongside these mothers. But that was, great people. The funders have great ideas, but they didn't know that Safe Families was a thing. Right. The government, once it cuts down on the cost of keeping a kid in a foster care system, so it aligns and helps them. But we all needed to come together to actually do that. And it's a model that they have rolled out in DC. They've seen the kids go from 2,000 kids in the foster care system to 500 over 7 years. So they cut it down by a dramatic percentage.
Yeah, so you alluded to resources that are needed, and you mentioned grants. So how's AOI funded?
The way that AOI is funded now is through our clients will hire us, oftentimes on a 6-month engagement or a year-long
engagement. So it's
fee-for-service. Fee-for-service,
okay.
Yeah.
And then you help them then get additional funding, like grants?
So sometimes, we're not fundraisers. We help people foster, steward, and cultivate relationships. And really identify who are the other folks in the space. So we take that 10,000-foot view of who else is in the space that you should be working with that will further your efforts and help you increase your impact.
Got it. So I've known you long enough. I know you're a humble guy. You're not going to brag on yourself. But I noticed on your profile, your LinkedIn profile, you're a distinguished fellow from UPenn, which is, of course, an Ivy League school. What is that?
Yeah, so I love Penn. But so the fellowship was, I was surprised by it and really honored by it. But what it is it's what UPenn does that I really appreciate is they bring practitioners back to their school to help the students. So it's with the School of Government and with the master's students there. And so what we do is we come back there and help the students get sort of real world application for their degrees. Some of my favorite memories with that fellowship was I took 14 of the students up to New York during the United Nations General Assembly Week and brought them to different events that were going on where they were able to meet with CEOs of nonprofits. They were able to be in meetings with heads of state. Another favorite memory of mine is helping them with internships as well. Right. One of my students is actually going to Jamaica with me this week to actually see the work that's going on out there and help with the rebuild that's going on.
This week. So are you on a plane like every week or every other week? It seems like it.
Yeah, just about. I mean,
Wow.
there's some weeks where I'm in 8 states in 1 week. So
Wow.
I haven't been home a lot this year, but all good things.
Hopefully you got the elite status on these airlines.
It depends on the airline. If I'm on American, I'm good, but Frontier and those other ones.
Yeah. So that's a lot of heavy work that you do. What do you do to focus on your own mental health, to take a break? What do you do?
Yeah, it is heavy work, but I also think you see the best in people. Like you see people at their finest, where they are coming alongside and serving people, and I think that service and adrenaline just makes me happy. I will say there are times when you come back and you realize that the work that you do will save lives, and if you don't do it, people are going to have some major challenges with that. But as far as mental health goes, I like to stay active. My faith is a big part of that, and being in community. So every Thursday morning, I meet with the same group of 7 other guys, and we discuss our faith and our life together. I think friendship and being in community is so important.
Well, the name of this podcast, of course, is TLC Connections, and connections with people is one of the themes. And you just exude that. I mean, everything you're talking about is connecting and partnerships and people first and relationships and friendships. And so what's next for you?
I'm excited for a couple of things. In Philadelphia, I want to spend more time there working in communities. I'm starting this sort of tour throughout the city called Good Things Happening in Philadelphia, where we're going and highlighting the people who are doing the great work in community and trying to connect them to one another through that. There's so many great people, whether it's South Philly, West Philly, North Philly, who've been serving their communities and have produced great fruit. And we want to go and highlight their stories and honor them and be able to bring resources to them. So I'm really excited about that. And then I'm also heading out to Liberia soon with a couple of friends to do some water projects out there. And that I'm really excited about because I'm going with friends of mine who we've been friends for like 14 years. So being able to do that with people you love is really exciting.
So you travel a lot with work in your company and your ministry. Where would you travel just for fun, just for a vacation?
Yeah, so I love the outdoors. I'm an avid hiker and biker, and I would love, my dream trip is to go hike Patagonia. That's something I really want to do.
I can't help to notice you're wearing Patagonia too. So
yeah, so maybe I'm trying to manifest it. I can't wait. And actually, a couple of friends and I are going to hike the Grand Canyon in May. So I try to schedule at least one intense outdoor adventure a year with a couple of close friends.
Okay, we're good for you. Final question is, what have I not asked you that you had hoped I would have asked, or any parting words of wisdom you'd like to leave for our listeners?
I would say this. I think you did a wonderful job. The one thing I would leave with the listeners is, during this time of in our country and in the world, I think it can be overwhelming to how can you make a difference, right? But we all have a next step. And my invitation to everyone is it doesn't have to be big, but if you do the little things with lots of love, like Mother Teresa said, we will make the world that we want to see. And so my encouragement to the listeners is whatever's in front of you, whether it's in your family, in your church, in your community, just take that next step and see what happens.
Wise words and deeds. Thank you very much, Dennis.
My pleasure. Thank you, GT.
All right, take care.
TLC Connections is supported in part by the Lincoln Center for Family and Youth. Through education, counseling, coaching, and consulting, we empower people to make positive choices, meaningful connections, and transformational change. To learn more, visit thelincolncenter.com.